So I'm going to talk to you today as a pastor would to his congregation as it pertains to us in our 27th year of ministry. I was born pretty much and raised here in this campus. When I was a kid, I cut my teeth on the pews here. I went to local high school, then went away to college, came back from college. I didn't want to work in any other church. I wanted to work in this church. And then in 1997, went over to start our church in Doral, not having any idea that the Lord would bring us back 10 years ago to do what we're doing today. So it's 27 years. Look what the Lord has done. And what will God do in the future? And I believe today's message will help me kind of lay the groundwork for what is the next and how to go about getting there. Exodus chapter 33, it's a lot of reading, it's even moving. Dial into this story. Pick it up in verse 9. As Moses went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and stay at the entrance, while the Lord spoke with Moses. Whenever the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, they all stood and worshiped, each at the entrance to their tent. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. Moses said to the Lord, "You have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways so I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people." The Lord replied, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Then Moses said to him, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth?" And the Lord said to Moses, "I will do the very thing you have asked, because I am pleased with you and I know you by name." Then Moses said, "Now show me your glory." And the Lord said, "I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion." But he said, "You cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live." Then the Lord said, "There is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen." I wanted to title this message, "When the Lord Showed Moses His Arse." But Pastor Mary did not want me to, because she wasn't sure you would know what an arse is. So I'm entitling this message today, "The Day God Showed Moses His Backside." Let's pray. Heavenly Father, it's a blessing to stand on this platform and share your word, and especially read of such a powerful story and event that occurred with Moses and you. But sometimes we just need some more aid in understanding it. So today in this message, we're praying for revelation and clarity of understanding. Anoint not only your speaker, but everyone that hears this word today. And we'll be careful to give you the praise and glory for it all in thy name. Amen and amen. Thank you. It was years ago that I was remodeling my bathroom, and some of you may have heard this story before, but my dad had this tendency to always be the, what do they call it, the kind of backseat driver, the Monday morning quarterback, the guy that gives you advice after you are almost completely done with a project. So today it just so happens to be my dad would have turned 88 years of age. Yesterday, Mom and him would have celebrated their 67th anniversary had he had not passed on in 2020. But I had been working to remodel this bathroom of ours, and he came over one night, and the bathroom was almost done, and I had just installed the shower light, and I was so impressed with the shower light because I could use it and control it by Bluetooth with my phone. And I wasn't really sure of the whole concept, if I was supposed to bring my phone in the shower with me to operate it or keep it out and deal with it. But the thing was, it would have lighting, different colors of lighting, and it was really nice. And then I could actually play music through it. And it was a great idea, I thought, and I was so excited about it. And then I invited my dad over, and he was looking at everything, and the walls were pretty much tiled and everything. And I brought to his attention the light, and he didn't say one thing about the light. He just told me, he says, you know what you're going to need? You're going to need a shower bar. And I'm like, Dad, shower bars are for old people. I don't need a shower bar. Well, that was that. Finally finished the work, the house, got in my shower. I was loving my light. And it was fun for about 2 months, because then Mary would walk in while I'm showering, and you know how that goes, husbands and wives, and I'm having conversation with her, and she couldn't hear me, I couldn't hear her, so we had to turn off the music. That didn't help. And the different lighting I didn't really care for, because I couldn't really see if I was getting the dirt and everything off like I was needing to. And it just so happened that light lasted about a year. But you know what happens every night now? As I go to try to wash the bottom of my feet, I look for a shower bar, and I don't have one. When I go to dry the bottom of my legs and my feet, I'm looking for that shower bar. And it's like my dad comes in the shower with me every night and says, I told you. Since I'm being transparent with you, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. When it comes to pastoring this church these days, there are times where I'm totally confident in what I'm doing. But then again, there are other times when I'm really not sure. The world as we knew it in 1997 is not the same we're now living 27 years later in 2024. And that's where the challenge is. On one hand, it's easier to pastor as it pertains to the business side with more people, staff, and resources. As today, you're able to lean into those wonderful people, like we were able to do with the 24 hours of prayer. It wasn't just about Pastor Mary or myself having to hit our knees and pray for 24 hours. There was a great group of over 400 people that joined us. That makes it a bit easier. Back in the day before I was in ministry, pastors would pastor, and they were almost like the one-arm wallpaper hanger. They had to do everything to try to get the job done. That's the easier part. When we're dealing with the buildings and we're dealing with the resources, quite frankly. That's because of those resources, it makes ministry fun and exciting and sometimes easier when you do it the right way. On the other hand, it's more challenging with having to tiptoe through the minefield of politics and cultural wokeisms and the dysfunctions of a more complicated life that so many people bring with them through the doors of our church. You're just not sure, not so much in what to say as much as it is in how to say it. How do you preach righteousness without making people in sin feel convicted? There's a challenge with it. Which is why, as we deal with this obvious sin that is in the world today. Back in 97, we would preach righteousness and sin and right versus wrong. And in 2024, now it seems like all right is wrong and all wrong is right. It's hard to know who you're preaching to in some churches because there may be people that you think are one gender, but yet they're not because they've transitioned into another. It's unique to have youth group today because you have young people coming in and maybe they aren't who they permit themselves to look like they are. Only to have one of the young men or young women totally upset when they learn that they are being approached by someone that isn't their real gender. Big challenges. Because of what the sin is in our culture that is just so obvious, which is why I can so relate to the story that we just read about Moses. Moses, he knew what the plan of God was to get the people out of Egypt. They weren't slaves to Pharaoh. They were servants of the Most High God. And Moses had an assignment to get them out from under Pharaoh's heavy hand of bondage so they can live under God's hand of provision, prosperity, and protection. And he started to do this with confidence. He wasn't confident at first. He didn't think Pharaoh would ever respond to him. But after going through what he went through with all the plagues, and then positioning the people to be saved from the death angel, to then find themselves leaving and walking out of Egypt to face the Red Sea, to then have it divided and they walk across and they find deliverance on the other side. All of those little victories and all of those little steps were allowing Moses to become more and more confident. And now he's so confident that he heads up to a mountain. And on the mountain, he hears from God and he begins to write down what would be the commandments of God or the system of laws that would help this new society of God's people. But then in the midst of doing this, he comes down and he hears this roar that's going on. He thinks at first it's the roar of war, but yet it's the war of worship, only to find his people that he fought for and labored for and sacrificed for and gave his heart for, to see that they had turned from their worship of one true God to the worship of this golden calf. And now he's faced with the worst of humanity and those he's leading who flagrantly sinned against God. Moses needed God. It was now more than ever moment. It was a literal do or die scenario because the people had committed the sin of idolatry, worshiping other gods, which reminds me so much of where we're at today with people. They worship themselves more than they worship the one true God. The people, as a result of committing this sin, the worship of other gods, idolatry, God begins to pronounce judgment on them. And it was a harsh judgment. Somewhere around 3,000 people were killed with the sword of the Levites. And the Levites would eventually become the tribe of priests that God would use to minister in his temple to him on behalf of the people. How interesting this group of pastors in training had their start. Actually, they were called up. God said, you call up the Levites, and the tribe of Levi came forward. This was the pastors or the young servants, the associates, the mentors. This was their training into the ministry. He says, now strap a sword on their side. And he says to them, you go through the people, and if it means killing your brethren and your brothers, do so, because they have operated in sin. And they did it. What a group of pastors in training. They went out and killed, the Bible said, over 3,000 men. Doesn't include women in that, but over 3,000 men, which means women would have also, could have been double that. The judgment of God was swift. And lives were lost. Imagine the news. Imagine the social media feeds. And then God struck them with a plague. If that wasn't good enough, he strikes them with a plague. Now, this takes Moses back, as you can imagine. But Moses is put in a precarious situation. Here, Moses stands before Pharaoh and says, God says, let my people go. He's saying, these are God's people, and I'm the spokesman. Now let his people go, Pharaoh. And Pharaoh made it possible for God's people to go. But in this scenario, God is so angry at these people that then God says to Moses, your people, I want to slaughter them all. And God says, you can't do that. That's going to give you a bad reputation. I got a whole other story or message stirring up in my spirit about that right there, that Moses would even put himself, yes, he's a type of Jesus, but he was willing to put himself between God and the people. I'm afraid we have too many Christians today going after the people that are in sin. Not the sin, but the people that are in sin, or the people that don't agree with them politically, and they go after them rather than positioning themselves between the judgment of God and that awful behavior. I do want to be more Moses-like and less John the Baptist-like. However, God says to him, you go and lead your people. And it's almost like God says, I didn't want these people. Moses saying, I didn't want these people. Nevertheless, I'll do it. And God's anger is burning towards the people and wants them to move on, but doesn't want to be around them because of his righteousness, his holiness. And so he tells Moses, take the lead. You take the people on to the promised land. Follow my cloud by day and my fire cloud by night. And you take them on. But to Moses, that wasn't enough. So he says to God, if you don't come with us, then we're not going. I don't want to go unless you're there to go with me. To which God replies, you got it. I'll go with you. Not because of the people, but because I am pleased with you and know your heart. And as beautiful as that moment is, that's not the most powerful aspect of this story, which then happens when Moses makes a bold ask of God. And he says, Lord, then show me your glory. I'm sure if God could have been startled, he would have been startled. But God gives Moses what he asks for. And he put him on the cutout on the side of a mountain. We see this over in chapter 34. Takes his hand, God's big hand, covers his eyes, the eyes of Moses, while he passes in front of him. Then he pulls back his hand and he exposes his backside for Moses to see. And evidently what Moses needed to see to help him move out into the leadership with the people was enough. When he looked at the backside, the arse of God, they laughed. They got it. Now, somebody says, what's arse? Go look it up. No, don't. Don't look it up. Go ask somebody who's laughing. Maybe they know. Now, I want to break something down here because this is very unique. There's some things that are going on here that, quite frankly, it goes beyond what we usually can tackle in a few minutes on a Sunday morning. So let's try to take two aspects of this revelation that we see here and theologically try to get a little understanding of what took place. For instance, the first thing I want to look at is when he talks about this image of God that Moses wants to see. He says, show me your glory. And evidently there was an image issue, not just a spirit or a flume of smoke. There was something there that he wanted to see. And God even let him know that you got to be careful because no man has ever seen this and lived. So there was an image. And what is that image? It's important that we understand what that image would have looked like. It's actually called a theophany. A theophany is a description of a manifestation or an appearance of God in the form of a person. Though it's visible, it's not material. So think of it this way. We're all made in the image of God. And we have a face. And therefore something translates When people look at us, you will see, when you look at yourself, you will see a type of image of God. Now, does his face look like ours? I'm not sure. But there is a face attached to God. However, his face is not necessarily material like ours is. He has a face, but in reality, he is too incomprehensible to just confine him or limit him to the image of our own flesh. So it's a theophany. It's an image that the writer is using to describe this particular encounter. Second of all, the phrase that is found in verse 20, where it says, "No one has seen my face and lived," is not what it sounds like it is at first glance. Because we read in verse 11 about the tent of meeting, where God would have this encounter with Moses. And it's so beautiful because there are these two encounters or meeting places that God would have. He would have this encounter or conversation with Moses, and the Bible actually says that the Lord would meet him there in the tent of meeting, and he would speak to Moses face to face as one who speaks to a friend. And yet we're being told that no man can see the face of God and still live. So evidently there's two different things that are taking place. One seems to be more of an encounter that he's having with Moses and Moses having with God, where they are in this relationship, not a literal face-to-face meeting. Two places God would meet him. One would be at the tent of meeting, and it was so beautiful because the cloud, the presence of God, would fall on that tent of meeting, and the people, when Moses would go out, would see the cloud. They would then go to their own tent and stand outside the tent and look over at the tent of meeting where the cloud was, and they would wait because they knew their man Moses was there interacting or interceding and praying and communing with God. And they wouldn't go back into their own tents until the cloud was lifted and Moses would come on his way back. And the Bible tells us that those encounters that God would have, whether it's there at the tent of meeting or whether it was there on a mountain, because remember, God also met with Moses on the mountain, and that same cloud would come and descend on that mountain. And it was so powerful that the mountain would begin to rumble. And it was said that when Moses would go up there and you would see the cloud, that no man should touch the mountain, and not even an animal should graze on the mountain. It was a powerful place where God would have this interaction with Moses. And sometimes it was so powerful that when Moses would come down from that mountain, the people couldn't even look on his face, and he would have to wear a veil because the glory, the shine, the sheen of God would be on his face, and the people just had to shield themselves from that sheen, that shine. So this face-to-face encounter, what is that? Well, Moses evidently saw some aspect of God because he is alive, he lived, and was able to write about it. So then what aspect of God is he referring to here? Well, the face would represent the attributes of God that relate to his very essence. That he is a spirit, he's ever present, he's immortal, he's holy, he's eternal, he's self-existing, he's all-powerful, he's invisible, he's self-sustaining, he's all-knowing, he's unified, and he's transcendent. Now that is powerful. Those are words that describe the very essence and being of God. He's not he doesn't do these things, he is these things. And if you want to know more of these things, then you need to be dialed in to our teachings that we're going to be doing during Revive that happen at 8 a.m. on your computer and 12 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, as we'll be talking more about these things. But it's this very essence that no man could look upon and live. We think the atomic bomb, which was so powerful, that the moment it went off disintegrated everything that the flume or the cloud would touch, including humanity. That's the very essence of God. He is all powerful. And if we looked on his power in these broken state bodies and minds of ours, it would be like an atomic explosion. You wouldn't survive the aftermath. Your knowledge is one thing and you are smart. But compared to the all-knowing power of God, you know nothing. No man can look on that power that is God and live. It's the essence, not the physical image of the face. It's the very essence, and it's so powerful that God says, I can't even let you glimpse at it. So when I pass by you, I'm going to put you in the cleft of the rock. I'm going to actually hide you in a little cave. I'm going to hide you because I'm going to need the help of the cave to cover me, as well as my hand, because my essence is so strong you couldn't look at it and live. But what about the back? The back would represent the lesser attributes of God, which show us the character of God. Watch this. Like his holiness, his goodness, his faithfulness, his patience, his righteousness, his honesty, his lovingness. He's just, he's fair, he's forgiving, he's pure, he's consistent, and he's merciful. Those are the qualities God says to Moses, I can reveal to you. I can show you my mercy. I can show you my patience. I can show you my goodness. That part of me, that essence of me, that you can look on and live. Matter of fact, that is what helps sustain you here on this earth, that keeps you alive. That I can show you. So God does so. And I would say they were the qualities of God that Moses would have to lean on, lean into. Moses knew that he can lean into God's righteousness and God's patience and God's lovingness and God's forgiveness and God's purity and God's mercy. He knew he could lean into it because as he led these people would fail. And they would need to be forgiven of their sin. They would need to be loved through their dysfunction. He knew that these slaves that were raised in 3 generations of slavery needed some grace and some mercy because they would falter along the way. That's what you look at when you look at the backside of God. Actually, it's what he revealed when his son Jesus went to the cross. Because that is God in the flesh. And though you may not have looked at the other aspects of the face of God, you could look into the face of his son, who would be his reputation here on this earth. And on the cross, you didn't see judgment, not for humanity. You saw judgment of God for a minute, and no man could see it. So what did God do? He turned out the lights on the earth, because in seeing the judgment of God, where his son had to carry the sins of humanity before him, you couldn't look on that part of God. So darkness covered the earth for that period of time. But then you saw the face of God when Jesus came back and he walked amongst the people. And there amongst the people, you saw him immediately demonstrate this forgiving heart and pure heart and fair and just God when he looked at Peter and he said, Peter, lovest thou me? Oh, you know I do, Jesus. And even though I blew it and I denied you, yes, I love you. That's the part of God that we can look at. And it's the part of God that I ask that our church for the next 27 years of its existence. And that whatever generation leads it will always be attentive to that part of God, even if it's just His backside. Grab hold of that one. When you're at home with your family and you're tempted to make a judgment about something in the moment, and you want to say something that could be very hurtful and very destructive, instead of looking at the person, remind yourself that you can look at the backside of God. When we're tempted to make a judgment call about what's happening politically and in the world today, and we're ready to slam on somebody and use our social media platform to make a statement or hurt someone with those words, let's not look at the person, let's not look at the sin, but let's try to find the arse and backside of God and look at that. Because here's what this says to us today, and I need a few more moments, because this is my revived message for you. I got a friend that'll preach next Sunday morning. You're going to love him. My mom's going to be here next Sunday morning. You're going to love it. My mother-in-law is going to be here. It's going to be a great service. And I won't have time to give a revived sermon. So here's my revived sermon. Because I got to break down this great story. And it's moving and it's impactful. It's powerful. You'll remember this story forever. But we got to break it down. How does this apply to us today? How do you take this home? Flesh it out. Well, it comes down to this. When it comes to your life, so you're a vision. When it comes to you having a vision for your life and your future. When it comes to you receiving a promise from God. When it comes to all of that, and when it comes to us moving forward as a church, here's what you got to remember. God doesn't need to show you everything. He only needs to show you what you need in the moment. Even if it's just His backside. We all have plans, big plans for the future. And we want to walk in them today. But as long as we can sense God in this moment. Look at me, look at me, look at me. In the now. Then that's enough. For starters, we can do it. Seeing the big picture can sometimes overwhelm us. We're not going to really believe it if God showed us everything anyway, so why waste the energy and the time to do that? Just take the glimpses that God will show you, and that should be enough to sustain you for today. In John 20, verse 29, Jesus says to His disciples, blessed are those who don't see and yet believe. You and I think we're blessed when we see or walk into the promise, but you'll never see the promise if you don't first see the promise keeper. And you got to see and stay focused on Him, even if it's just His backside. So see what you know about the promise keeper today. Here's what you know. Listen, He's good. He's a good God. He's a loving God. He's a faithful God. He's a never late. He's an always right on time kind of God. And that's all you need to know in order to believe He'll do what He's promised He's going to do for you. But you know what God will give you? And He actually gives you the opportunity to participate in you walking into what you want as a promise for your life. When it says He wants to give you the desires of your heart, He's going to give you something for you to have those desires. You know what it is? Yes, you do. A vision. He'll give you a vision. That's why He says in Habakkuk, write the vision down, make it plain, so that then you can run with it. Here's what He's telling you. He's saying, I'm going to let you craft your own promise for tomorrow. And I'm going to pretty much agree with it because I'm going to put a leader in there and I'm going to lead you in it by my Spirit and show you what your tomorrow and your future can look like. It's the year of vision. Plan out your next year. Plan out your next 5 years. If you want to be bold, go 10 years. Do what you got to do. Write it down. And I believe if you do so with a heart of purity, the Lord will allow that heart or that vision to be a pure vision for your life. But then you want to do like I do sometimes. Okay, God, I want this vision now. I know it's 5 years, but can you start showing me a little bit of it right now? Can I start enjoying a little bit of it right now? How many know what I'm talking about? You want it in the future, but I'll take a little bit now. And God says, no, that's for the future. And I just can't show you what it's really going to look like because eye hath not seen nor ear hath heard, and neither has entered into the heart or the mind of man what I have planned for you. Because if I showed you everything, you wouldn't be able to handle it. You wouldn't be able to sustain it. You might even blow it. You might screw it up. So he only gives us a glimpse. So you run with the vision God has given you to go look at it, because all he's going to do is show you enough of himself just to be able to get by for the day. But I can tell you why we all want to see it now. And it's not necessarily a good thing. Sometimes we want to see it now because we are weak in our faith. And so I don't have faith for the long run. I have faith for getting up today and just making the most of today. So God, give it to me now. I'm praying the other day during our 24-hour prayer time. And as I was praying, I found myself contradicting in my mind what my spirit was calling out to God to do. And in the middle of it, I was asking God for this, and by faith, we're going to do that. And for all of you that prayed with us, there were prayer things that we had on that screen. So we would call those things out. And as I'm praying for them, praying for members of our church, praying for unsaved loved ones to come through the doors, as I'm praying all of this, doubt and unbelief was also trying to convince me, well, that's not going to happen at this revive. It may be next revive. And I had to stop myself mid-prayer and say, Lord, please help me with my unbelief. I know God's going to do it, but I don't always have the faith for it. So we want to see now, we want to see the front and the back. We want to see the wholeness of the plan. We want to see all of God, because sometimes our faith is weak. Sometimes we just don't understand what God is doing. So we want to see it all now. Come on, how many of you have ever prayed, God, show up, show me something of yourself? None of us have ever seen God. We've seen pictures of Jesus. We've gone to Israel. We've seen Israeli Jews, and we think, all right, that's what Jesus would have looked like. We get to see the image of that, but no one has seen God. And how crazy is it that you and I are asked to believe in something that we have never seen? No man has seen it. So I get it. I get why the atheist says, you guys are crazy for believing in this thing that you don't see. I got it. Sometimes I think I'm crazy. All I've known is this my entire life. I take the Bible as truth. And then last night we're sitting out in the backyard with Lauren and Mary and I, and we're talking about, well, how in the world did Adam and Eve with their kids start to repopulate the earth if they were the first humans? Oh my God, he had daughters too, and the sons and the daughters were, oh my God. We're like thinking through all of that, and in our finite thinking, we're like, that's disgusting. We don't know all the details. And I can see why some people would sit there and say, you guys are just ridiculous to believe that stuff. Because it's all been authored by this God that we have never seen. So we pray, God, show me you. I want to see you. And I don't really think we're saying we want to see him physically. I think what we're asking him to do is just show us a part of you. Here's why we want to see it all. We're weak in our faith. We don't understand what God is doing, and some of us, we just think we deserve it. Show me everything, God. I've been in this thing a long time. I've put in my time. You owe it to me. I'm spiritually superior. It's called pride and ego. We think we deserve it all. But I'm going way too long, so let me get to my charge to you, because as your pastor, as your shepherd, as your friend, as somebody who really does want the best for you, here's my charge. And for this next generation that will one day lead this church, my charge is, get comfortable with being on God's backside. That's it. Because it'll remind you that He's enough, that you can trust Him. It'll position you, or position God in front of you where He needs to be. I know you're going to be tempted to run up ahead because you want to know what the plans are, and you have that mindset that you've got to control everything. I understand that completely. But being okay, being on the backside, keeps God out in front. It'll keep you and I in the right posture, which is one of humility. We don't have to know it all. We just need to know who knows it all. And it keeps us guaranteed that we will reach our destination. With God out in front, let it remind you that He is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and He is the end. And that's a beautiful thing. You know, there are moments in my life where I really do wish I just had a minute to talk to my dad. And every one of you who have lost a father or a mother, you have that same feeling. I'm okay that he's here, not here at 88 years of age. He would have been a very miserable older man. And those of you who knew him know that. But when we had our relaunch, I'm sorry to cry. When we had our relaunch, I'm sitting in front next to my wife and my mom and my kids, my uncle. And for one moment I thought, Dad, I wish you were here just to see what we did with your building. And some of you who knew my dad, you probably were feeling the same thing. We wouldn't have wanted him here during the remodel. Every bathroom would have had a shower bar. We would have been okay with him not being here, but I would have loved for him to just look over at me and say, Steve, you did a good job. My uncle said, man, Stevie, if your daddy was here, he'd be so proud. Can I ask you this question? And I'm closing. What's worse in life than not getting to the promised land that you feel like God has given you? What's worse than you not getting there? Moses tells us what's worse, because he says it this way. Even though God said to him, Moses, you go on ahead to the promised land. And you go get there, because I'm going to keep my promise with you. So you go. My presence will be there, because the cloud will lead you and the fire by night will sustain you. But I can't go with you. And what does Moses say? God, I don't want to go to the promised land if I can't find you in it. I want you to be there, God, when the work is done. I want you to look over at me, God, after I did my work to lead your people. And I want you to say, good job. church, we may find ourselves tempted to think that marketing campaigns, social media posts, bigger buildings, and more people is going to make us successful as a church. But if we do all of that and God is not in it, it's for naught. And it will be very empty. And that's not just true of this church. It's true of the vision that you have for your life and your future. So let's go forward and let's be okay looking at God's ours. I love you, Benjamin. God bless you.